am Elara Quinn, 32 years old, living in Hickory Bend, Ohio, a quiet Midwestern town where a woman rebuilds her life after betrayal, moving into a small studio and choosing to focus on healing, work, and self-discovery. And I tell this in a calm, plain voice because that is how I learned to live again after the storm that came from someone I trusted with my heart. A storm that turned the everyday rhythm of my life into a jagged line that I had to walk without breaking myself in the process. I am the kind of person who wears soft colors and a steady smile even when the mind inside is busy with questions. The kind who keeps a notebook of small wins and a tiny garden on the windowsill, because growth happens in little increments. And I am not loud, but I am not easily moved either, which is why the moment I realized something was not right in my own home felt like a sudden winter wind that could shove me into a corner or push me to finally move. My world was simple and honest at first, a predictable routine of work, a quiet apartment, a few trusted friends who checked in now and then, and a growing interest in the art I sell at a small shop downtown, where the town has learned to recognize the soft lines of my landscapes and the way I pour a cold coffee into a cup and listen to the town wake up around me. And in this life where healing was the goal, I had begun to build a new kind of self, careful, deliberate, patient. The kind who can endure pain because she understands that pain is not the end of the story. It is part of the weather of becoming who you are meant to be. Then one ordinary morning the weather shifted, a telltale breath in an otherwise quiet room, and the room no longer seemed ordinary at all, because I found messages on my partner's phone that did not belong to me, and they were not friendly notes or innocent jokes. They were plans and promises and a few lines that suggested the kind of closeness that should never be shared with the person who is meant to be mine. And in that moment, the door to my trust slammed shut. The air grew heavy with words I did not want to hear and did not expect, and I stood there with the steady heartbeat that has kept me alive through many small storms, and decided that I would not be pulled into a lie that could only hide more lies. So I faced the truth with a courage that surprised me, that even surprised the room that I stood in. And I told him that I deserved something better than the surface apology he was ready to offer. I told him that I had seen enough of his excuses to know that there was nothing left between us that could be saved, and I walked away. I packed a few essentials. I did not leave a note for the drama I knew would come, because I wanted to leave a clean space for healing to begin. And I knew in that moment that I could not keep living in a place where trust had been broken in such a public way. So I moved my life into a small studio that faced a street I did not know well but could learn to love. And I told myself that this decision was a kind of mercy to me, to my past self who had believed in a future built on honesty and steady hands. And I promised to fill this new space with work, with quiet mornings, with the sound of brushes against canvases, and with the slow, steady process of healing. The man I believed in became a ghost that haunted the corners of the town I still loved. And the coworker who had become part of my life through him turned into a painful symbol of a betrayal that I could not fix with a single argument. And this is where Act 1 ends and Act 2 begins. Because in order to solve the problem, I have to live with the problem and learn how to become stronger than the ache. And I must admit that solving it will mean breaking free not only from the person who broke my trust, but from the version of myself who kept hoping for a different ending. I go to work each day with a careful plan. I keep my studio door open only to the people who deserve the light of my attention. I take long walks along the river that cuts through the town, and I listen to the water as if it were a teacher whispering about courage. And I throw myself into the art that has always saved me, painting scenes of resilience and renewal, and I begin to notice a strange truth, that the more I invest in my own healing, the more boundaries become a natural rhythm rather than a shield. And that truth feels like a small sun in the window of my studio. Yet the road is not smooth, and the more I push the past away, the louder it calls, because the coworker who stood by my partner's lies continues to drift into my life in small, awkward, unavoidable ways. A glance in the break room, a chance meeting in the parking lot, a reminder that the town itself still carries rumors and stories about who I am and what happened, and I find myself standing at a corner where anger tries to push me toward a reckless idea, a desire to prove that I am not broken, just wounded, and that if I can hurt them the way they hurt me, I will feel like I am back in control. And for a moment, I come near to that low point where I imagine a dramatic confrontation, where I stomp into the office with a fury I did not know I possessed, and tell the world exactly how it feels to be betrayed. Where I want to shout down the man who thought he could pretend to be my partner. Where I want to drag the coworker into a spotlight and make him confess in front of everyone. And in that moment, I am on the edge of ruin because the old me would have done that. The old me would have made a scene and perhaps shattered more of my own peace. And I realize that is not the path to a new life, so I choose a different plan. A final turning point where I refuse to be a spectacle for my own hurt. In Act 3, I make one last attempt to solve the problem, and this attempt is not a shout or a threat, but a clear, quiet declaration of who I am becoming. A decision to build a life that no betrayal can topple, and I decide to tell my story not as a weapon, but as a lesson I am willing to share with others who might be walking a similar road, so I organize a small art show in a community space. A simple exhibit that speaks of trust, pain, healing, and the stubborn light that refuses to go out. And I invite neighbors, friends, and the few people who have stood by me to walk through the doorway and read the stories in the paintings, the way the colors bend and rise like tides of emotion, and I do not expect applause. I expect honesty, and that honesty comes when someone who once doubted me asks about a piece that seems to glow with a strange warmth. And I tell the truth of what happened in a voice that does not tremble. I speak about the moment I decided to leave the apartment. I describe the fear of starting over in a town where every glance feels watched. I admit that I still miss the little life I had hoped to share with a partner. But I also describe the joy of reclaiming my own hours, my own studio, my own routine, and the strength that comes from choosing work and healing over revenge. And as the show runs its course, the reaction is not anger but a quiet recognition. A sense that I have earned the right to tell my own story, and that the town can hold two truths at once. That I was hurt and that I am rebuilding, that I once trusted too deeply, and that I now guard trust with a careful, watchful tenderness that will not be broken again. The final moment of this act comes when the coworker who helped fracture my peace slips into the gallery after hours. Not to apologize, but to listen, perhaps out of professional habit or perhaps because a small corner of him cannot ignore the art that has begun to speak louder than his deception, and I do not chase him away with a loud rebuke. I offer a measured, respectful presence, a chance to hear what a life looks like when pride is tempered by accountability. And in that moment, I feel a surge of something like mercy and something closer to a new certainty. That my response to the betrayal defines the rest of my life more than the betrayal itself. That my own future is not tied to the past actions of others, but to the courage I show in moving forward. And when the doors close, I find myself standing in the empty space of the studio, with the soft afterglow of evening painting the walls with calm. And I realize that I have crossed a threshold, that I have learned to exist with the ache but not be ruled by it, that I have found a new normal where healing does not erase the hurt, but gives it a place to stand. And I am no longer the person who waited for an apology to begin living again. I am the person who makes a life that is honest enough to hold both the memory of what was lost and the promise of what is to come. And so I walk forward into the town that once watched me with pity or curiosity, carrying with me the small studio that now feels like a lighthouse for the broken and the seeking. A place where I teach myself and others that resilience is not a loud triumph, but a quiet, steady practice. And I decide to keep painting, to keep growing, to keep choosing healing over revenge. To keep building a life one patient brush stroke at a time. Because in the end, the new normal is not a reaction to the past, but a creation of the future. And I am ready to welcome that future with my entire heart in Hickory Bend, Ohio, where the river teaches patience, and the town learns to see the strength that arrives when a woman decides to live honestly with her own truth, where the betrayal becomes a chapter we do not hide but a lesson we use to become better people, and where I, Elara Quinn, have learned that healing is a path I walk with my head held high, one careful step after another, toward a life that belongs to me and to no one else. And that is the ending of this story, a beginning that feels like coming home. A home inside my studio and a home inside my own unbreakable resolve. And if there is a twist to leave a portion of thrill, it is that the town now tells a different kind of story about me. A story that ends not with pity, not with judgment, but with respect for a woman who refused to surrender her future to a past betrayal. And that is how I know I am finally standing where I was always meant to stand, which is exactly where healing begins, exactly where I belong.